Atheists encounter our fair share of bizarre arguments when arguing with theists. I think some of the worst arguments, though, are the ones that are based on a claim of atheism somehow facilitating mass murder. It's both a poor argument on the merits of it, and a prejudicial and bigoted idea to convince others of. If some theists are telling atheists to our faces that atheism was part of the reason that the most infamous mass murderers did what they did, can you imagine what they're telling their kids about atheists behind closed doors at home? Then we'll have to contend with the next generation of self-styled warriors for Jesus who think that atheism is the cause of all kinds of social ills, and deal with the resulting social conflicts and discrimination based on their lies, which may seem like no big deal to a majority group like Christians, until they eventually find themselves a minority. More discrimination is not a good solution to any religious debate. When arguing with religious people on this subject, you can spend a little time, if you wish, on the issue of whether or not Hitler really was an atheist, and it's easy to demonstrate that he was not. I don't know of any atheist that would put Gott mit uns, German for God with us, on their military belt buckles, not to mention his writings. You could also mention that no dictator ever went to war in the name of atheism, even if they were atheists. These are probably not the most effective ways to go about arguing this subject, though. The basis of their entire argument is that atheism makes people capable of things that Christians are incapable of, and there are much more direct ways of destroying that argument. Just bear in mind that any example you bring up of Christians murdering others, even if the murderers themselves claim it's for Christianity, will be discounted because the instant the person does these things, the killer is no longer seen as Christian in their eyes. There's a saying for this fallacy, and I would name it myself, but I think it's fitting that I let my Scottish friend Angus do the honours.
Very well. Let this Scotsman tell you what the no true Scotsman fallacy really is.
Even as a best-case scenario for a Christian in this argument, letting them have all the Scotsmen they could possibly desire, they still could not claim that such a person is an atheist. Whether the person is following the tenets of their faith correctly, as determined by any particular Christian, just means that there's a difference in opinion about what a religion means. It doesn't turn a badly behaving religious person into a non-religious person. By that standard, there are a lot of Christians who would call Pat Robertson an atheist because they disagree with him, and I've never heard that suggested. That line of reasoning simply assumes that all really bad people who claim to be Christian are atheists, and now it's just a matter of drawing a line on how bad you have to be before you cross the atheist threshold. In that case, just tell them you've decided that scary lady from the Jesus Camp documentary, or that the Westboro Baptist Church is really the real Christianity. If you know the Bible well enough, you could easily provide chapter and verse about how they're right. There are quotes to support numerous conflicting positions in there. Really, for all the distancing themselves from the most incendiary of their fellow Christians, they seem to have forgotten one thing that is rather central to their faith. Christians often argue the finer points of what is more critical to being Christian, faith or works. And generally the more conservative Christians that try to turn mass murderers into atheists tend to be more on the side of faith. Hitler could have been a true believer and asked for forgiveness right before he died and gotten his golden ticket to heaven, right? No? Couldn't a regular person do that? So how many people do you have to kill before you can no longer do that? Is that covered in the Bible? I'm no Bible scholar, but I don't think it is. For all we know, if Christianity is true, maybe Hitler was the greatest last-minute redemption story in the history of Christendom, and he received forgiveness right before he died. Taking Hitler's name in vain all these years has made God very angry with you. Really though, when you get into these arguments, especially with someone you actually know personally, you may want to be very blunt about what they're doing and call it out for its bigotry, and attempt to smear an entire group of people on the basis of their non-belief in God. There are not a lot of religious arguments that have this level of hatefulness in them, and I think that if you can't even make a dent in their conviction that non-belief in their deity is somehow tied to mass murder, I would see fit to call their overall character into question. After all, convincing the majority that a minority is potentially dangerous is always the first step toward encouraging others to do something about it. They may not be doing it out of malice, but they really should understand how central that type of argument is toward dehumanizing a segment of society. That's something a certain non-atheist dictator knew all too well.